Have you heard? Are you registered? I am hosting my class, 3 Simple Steps to an Organized and Profitable Coaching Business. It's new and improved, and I'm going to teach you why you're always so busy. One mindset shift that will help you save 2.5 hours each week. The only 5 digital files you need. And I want you to know, one of my most respected coaches told me that she watched this class, a previous one that I held, and she got out her computer and she implemented what I told her to do in the class. And she said it was life-changing. She feels so much more organized. She's saving time because she knows where everything is on her computer. And it was simple the way I taught it, and she just did it, and it was great. So if you haven't, even if you have, I want to invite you to register for this class. I'm also going to tell you the one mistake every coach makes when trying to grow and how to avoid it. Okay, so you can register for the class at simplysquaredaway.com/free class. It's free. Did I tell you that? So get in there. Do not miss this. If you have a business, a coaching business, a consulting business, get in there so you are digitally organized and you know how to have an organized business so you can save so much time. Okay, I also want to say, do you have ADHD? Do you struggle with executive functions? I don't know why it's taken so long, but I am finally doing an episode on ADHD, specifically for coaches with ADHD, to teach you how to function better in your own business, but then also how to help your clients who have ADHD have more success. Okay. I'm so thrilled that Paula Engebretson is on here. She specializes in ADHD and coaching clients with that to get success, and she herself has it. So she knows exactly what it's like. We talk about how ADHD is connected to executive functions. We talk about how ADHD might have an impact on a coach running a business. And this is my favorite part, a client taking a program or getting coached by you if the client has ADHD, and how you can make your programs or courses more friendly. And then how she even mentions how Organized Coach Academy, the specific things in it that helped her as someone with ADHD have success in organizing their business. The other thing, which I thought was really good, which wasn't on our list, but a simple, compelling question that can help you and your clients figure out why you're not doing what you want to do, or why they're not doing what they want to do. And I love how she closes out this episode asking you or challenging you to think about your current content and identify one area to incorporate additional scaffolding. And she gives some really specific examples at the end of this episode for you to take action. So let's get into this amazing conversation with Paula Engebretson. Are you ready to work less, feel more organized and productive, streamline repetitive tasks, and implement systems that allow your coaching business to run smoothly even without you? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Organized Coach Podcast, your go-to source for practical tips and solutions. I'm your host, Tracy Hoth, professional organizer, certified life coach, simplifying expert, and most of all, down-to-earth fellow coach just like you. No matter if you think you're missing the organizing gene, have ADHD, or just love anything organizing, I'm here to help you become an organized coach with a business that works for you. Pull up a seat and let's get started. I've been looking so forward to this conversation with Paula Engebretson about ADHD, and I just have so many questions. We've kind of mapped out what we're going to talk about, and I just can't wait to help not only you, listener, as someone with ADHD, but also as a coach with clients that have ADHD. So we're going to cover all the basics. We're going to talk about it all. So welcome, Paula, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I want to start kind of at the very beginning. What is ADHD? And kind of I hear terms executive function and ADHD, and I'm always curious, like from the expert that you are, let's talk about what it means, what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So you're right. There's all these different terms that get thrown around. And you mentioned executive functions. So executive functions, basically they're like the brain's management system. Okay. So they sit in the prefrontal cortex of our brain right up at the front, and they're responsible for helping us plan and prioritize and complete tasks. It's like the where you can do all your adulting. Okay. And the ADHD brain, our prefrontal cortex is impacted, which makes our executive functions impacted. So
Mm.
we tend to struggle with these executive functions. It's harder for us to navigate organization and staying focused and managing our time and regulating our emotions and things. So essentially, an ADHD brain struggles with our executive functions, which then impacts all of those different areas.
So when you say ADHD brain, what I mean, I know from working with several clients that have ADHD that there's different types, but can you talk about what like the definition of that is and in your mind? Or
Yeah. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, even though I have thoughts about that because it's not actually a deficit of attention, it's a surplus. We're focused on so many different
oh,
things. Um, but the you can talk about ADHD. It used to be kind of classified as ADD or ADHD, and one of them was the inattentive type, one of them was the hyperactive type. Now it's all ADHD inattentive, ADHD hyperactive, or ADHD combined type. They're
oh.
basically as it sounds. The inattentive is honestly the one that tends to get overlooked most often in children, um, often diagnosed young girls who get overlooked because the inattentive is the one who is staring out the window, is quiet, is lost in their daydreams. They're not the hyperactive type or the combined type where they're bouncing off the walls and can't sit still in their chair. So the inattentive one can honestly be a teacher's dream because they're quiet, not causing problems, while the hyperactive draws the attention. So um, the that's basically, long story short, the three different types. There's the hyperactive type, inattentive type, combined type.
So what is actually happening in your brain that makes you someone with an ADHD brain?
Yeah, so it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. And essentially, we have different levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, uh, different levels in our brain that's impacting how we do these different things, these different executive functions. So, for example, for someone with ADHD, we struggle with inhibition or impulse control. Okay, this is one of the executive functions. And so, because of that, it's much more challenging for us to manage and resist distraction. So, we're having a harder time focusing on things because we don't have that ability as naturally as a neurotypical or someone who does not have ADHD. Uh, Similarly, we struggle with something called working memory. And so this is where you can basically, someone who doesn't struggle with working memory, they can hold and manipulate information in their mind for a short period of time. So if you read something, you can remember what you just read. Or if you're
Mm.
learning something, it's you can kind of hold it in your mind for a certain amount of time and, you know, eventually have it go into longer term memory. Um, for someone with ADHD, we have a really hard time holding that in our minds. Uh, Emotional regulation. So we struggle with regulating and allowing our emotions without acting on them. So we can be very emotionally driven. Uh, we struggle with task initiation, planning, time management. Okay, so this is another area of the executive functions. And so it's harder for us to get started on a big project or to break down that project into manageable steps
Mm.
and like sequence them out in the right order. That feels very hard for us. It's hard for us to prioritize and organize things. And then, kind of the fifth area where we tend to see the executive functions pop up, and I I'll offer a caveat. You will see people talk about executive functions in many ways, and as few as 3. I'm talking about 5 here, but you'll see it as few as 3 or 4. Some people talk about it in as many as 12. I'm just kind of talking about
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
5 that will most often show up probably for your listeners if they're working with clients who have ADHD, or if they have it as well. They'll notice these two, and the others. But the 5th is cognitive flexibility, and this is if you think about like cognitive being our brain, so mental flexibility. And this is our ability to transition between tasks or adjust to new plans. And ADHD brains are not so flexible. We're pretty inflexible. And so transitions can be hard. Starting things, stopping things can be hard. It's also where black and white thinking, perfectionism tends to come in, all or nothing, that kind of thing. So again, recap. For the ADHDer, it's impulse control, working memory, emotional regulation, task initiation, time management, and cognitive flexibility. These are kind of the obstacles that we run up against, which is literally everything in the world that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
What percentage of people have ADHD?
In the United States, the studies suggest that it's about 5% of the adult population, 1 in 20, right? If you know 20 people, at least one of them probably has ADHD.
Okay.
And I would argue that that number is higher, especially because there are so many people who were misdiagnosed or not, overlooked or whatever, because they had the inattentive type as
Yeah.
a younger child. And now they're recognizing the symptoms in different ways as they've gotten older.
So what's coming up in my mind is it a problem? Is it a like when you said you don't see it as a deficit, is it just that our brains are made differently, or is there something wrong? You know what I mean?
Mm, yeah, yeah. So you're going to get lots of different opinions on this one. You will hear some people talk about ADHD as this superpower, strength, wonderful thing, which I think I can see the reasoning behind that, especially for
Mhm.
young kids if they don't want to stand out or be, told that their brain's broken or whatever. But also it's a real obstacle. I mean,
Mm.
they talk about the ADHD tax of like all the extra challenges that we come up against
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis, and the extra work that needs to go into literally everything, because our executive functions control everything. So the amount of effort and the exhaustion that comes to the foreground just to make a phone call or an appointment is so draining that someone else might be able to just pick up and do without a second thought. And we've already, the ADHD community doesn't tend to use spoon theory, but like you've used up a bunch of spoons just to make that phone call because it used so much of the cognitive load.
Yeah.
Um, so it definitely is an obstacle. And yes, our brains are just working differently, but the world is not built for our brains to work
Yeah.
differently. And that's where the problem is, right? It's that the world does not support the way the ADHD brain thinks.
Yeah. So we kind of skipped over this, but tell us what your story is. Like,
Oh,
how'd you come into this? You are a coach for people with ADHD. So tell us more about what you do and how you came
yeah.
into it.
Yeah. So I'm an ADHD coach, and my whole mission is to essentially help fellow ADHDers step out of the neurotypical box and all the traditional productivity tips and actually find the systems that work for them, like learn how to work with their ADHD brains to get things done. And I before this life as a coach, I was a professor, and I was mentioning this to you earlier, but I was in a uh, training or a workshop or whatever for professors to help students with different learning abilities. And they came onto the slide or whatever of ADHD, and my brain exploded, and I saw my whole life kind of flash in front of me on that screen of this is what it looks like to be an adult with ADHD. And this was, I think, 2016. And so I went and got diagnosed and started learning so much more about the process, and uh, really kind of dove in and started doing the work then on learning how to work with my brain. Because prior to that, I just used all these traditional productivity strategies against myself. Like
Hmm.
why I should just be able to time block in this way. I should just be able to identify my top 3 priorities. And I'm like, but everything's important. I don't know. What? Stop it. So that's when I first learned, and that's when I started diving in and realizing, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. This is
Yes.
where I'm meant to be.
So were you able to look back on your life and think, "Oh my gosh, that's what was wrong. Like that's what happened."
Yeah. Yes. And I'll also offer, everybody has a very different experience with the diagnosis process, especially if it's a later diagnosis. For me, it provided a ton of relief because I
Mhm.
tended to should on myself constantly and compare myself, and like everyone else can just XYZ in, insert anything, and I was not doing it enough. Um, and to be able to see it so much more compassionately through this lens of, oh, that's why you're not
Mhm.
broken. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. Literally, it is harder for your brain to make a plan. It's harder
Yeah.
for your brain to break down these steps. It's harder for your brain to transition from one thing to the next. That's why you get so crabby. Oh, good to know. Let's put in some supports.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've worked with different clients where coming to my mind, one was like, "Oh, help me prioritize this project." Like you said,
Hmm.
that's
Yep.
what they needed help with. And another one was talked about impulsive control with relationships. And,
Yep.
she recognized one time when she wanted to say something so bad and she waited. And then the next morning, it wasn't at all what she imagined in her mind the night before. So
Mhm.
lots of things like I can see would be so helpful to be able to get coaching with someone to be able to see how and learn tools to be able to do that. So let's kind of start talking about that. As a coach with ADHD, trying to run your business, and also maybe you are a client or you're thinking about your clients who have ADHD, what's helpful? So, where do we want to go? What do we want to start with?
Yeah. So maybe what I'll first offer is for your coaches who are listening who do have ADHD. Okay. I want you
Hmm.
to know I see you.
Hmm.
And maybe I'll talk about just a handful of areas where they might notice it coming up so that they can go, oh, wait, no, that's why. It's not that I'm
Yes.
just suck at life. It's not that I just can't do this well. Here are some reasons.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about how it might be showing up for clients and some strategies we can put in place.
Okay,
That
perfect.
work?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I think one of the big areas for coaches with ADHD is the whole time management component, being able to create a schedule, stick to a schedule. Not all of us are built to do really rigid time blocking and map out our whole week on Monday or whatever, and that kind of thing. And so it's to allow yourself the this space to figure out what structural support works for you is really important, and allowing yourself to iterate and figure out how long things take, because a lot of us struggle with something called time blindness. I don't know if it's been 30 minutes or 3 hours. I don't know. Like, I just don't have that way of tracking time. It doesn't feel real. And so I have like, I have these timers all over so I can keep
Oh,
track
that
of.
one was huge. I have a little one
Yes,
like
yes,
this.
yes, yes.
That
I
one
need the
was
big
big.
one.
Yeah.
So it's like giant in my face. Um, and so having some strategies to help you figure out how long things take, that kind of thing. Another big obstacle, as we were just talking about, is the prioritization of knowing what's most important. Because especially when you're first starting coaching, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do all the things. I have to, I have to literally do everything right now. And when you pair that with our impulsivity and we're jumping from one thing to the next because everything seems important, it can be very challenging. So finding supports to help clarify those priorities. Um, Similarly, emotional regulation. So as ADHDers, we are feeling these emotions very immediately, very strongly. We're often quick to overwhelm and frustration. Um, and I need to offer, overwhelm is not an indulgent thing for an ADHD, our nervous system is literally overstimulated and can't process. And
Mm-hmm.
so giving yourself that space when you're feeling that overwhelm is important. Similarly with boredom, right? A lot of us, if we're dealing with some sort of task that's really boring, it's not just an inconvenience. It's not just kind of annoying of, oh, that's so boring. No, our brain literally shuts down. So,
Mm.
for example, when I was a professor, before I was diagnosed, before I was medicated and everything, I literally would fall asleep. So I'd be trying to read these articles, which are so freaking boring. And I'm trying to read them, and my working memory is trying so hard to like capture the stuff. And there's not enough stimulation because it's an academic article. And I would literally, my husband would come down and he'd find me asleep at my desk, head down, because I couldn't stay awake. Um, so like it's not just an inconvenience. Literally, your brain can't stay awake sometimes. Um, and then also, a lot of us navigate something called rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is this intense experience of rejection, perceived rejection, potential rejection, which can really keep us from advertising our
Mm.
business, from putting ourselves out there, from marketing, anything like that. And then, of course, the things you typically think of with ADHD: organization, project planning, which is where your program comes in so great. Um, but like all of these different areas. So if you are navigating that, first of all, I see you, and it's not you. It's just that we want to put in some supports to help with that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think the first time I met you was when you joined Organized Coach Academy. And
Mm-hmm.
then we introduced ourselves and you said, I have ADHD. And I was like, I just panicked. I'm like, I hope it's okay. Like, I hope it's helpful. I hope I have enough tools in there or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so encouraging because you said, yes, yeah, it had some of those
Yes.
things in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, well, maybe let's talk about maybe what coaches, if they have clients who have
Yes.
ADHD, what supports they could put in place, because you do a lot of like you do these things so well. So
Yeah. Let's talk
I think
about
that
that. And
would
then we'll
be,
kind of come back to the client part of it or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Um, because again, so if you are a coach and you have clients who have ADHD, they're going to be struggling with all these things that I've already been talking about, right? So they're struggling with their attention and their focus and their impulsivity and trying to like focus on a video and knowing what to prioritize, right? And their working memory is trying so hard to remember things, and they don't know what's actually most important, and they're probably dealing with black and white thinking, going, "Oh my gosh, I didn't do this perfectly. So now I just need to stop because I'm so ashamed that I couldn't keep up with it." And their rejection sensitivity comes online, right? And they're struggling with the organization. So they're dealing with all of this too. And so as a coach, if you want to um, help put in some supports for any of your clients with ADHD, I'll first say, if you're working one-on-one with somebody, now this isn't, of course, possible if you have a big group and everything necessarily, but
Hmm.
if you're working one-on-one, you can literally ask, like, what would look like amazing support for you? I know all ADHD brains are different. And I know that sometimes prioritization is hard, sometimes emotional regulation is hard. What would feel super amazing for you? Do you want me to Voxer you and see how that's going? Do you want me to like whatever? If you're open to that, if you have that space as a coach, asking is amazing. So I'll just
That
offer
is
that
amazing.
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but then also tactically, in terms of content. So a lot of us have a program or we have materials or something like that. Um, if there's a way that you can address the information through different mediums, like orally, visually, kinesthetically, hands-on type learning, right? If you have videos, breaking them down into shorter segments so they're not like an hour to try and sit through, but shorter segments so you can easily revisit them. If possible, make it so that you can change the speed. Most ADHDers I
Mm.
know cannot listen to things on single speed. We're at least 1.5, usually 2 times speed. Um,
Yeah.
put captions on so we can
Mm.
visually follow along with things. Maybe you make slides or guided notes to help highlight those key points. Because again, My brain's like, I don't know, is all of this important? Every single point? Let me write down literally every word you're saying. But if you have, this is the thing, remember this, great.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe offering, like, if all of your content is video, maybe having it on a podcast or having an audio version as well. A lot of us are
Mm.
good with there's something called parallel tasking that a lot of ADHD brains like to do when we're like, I'm always for those of you listening, I'm always crocheting something. I'm holding up a thing I'm making. So whenever I'm learning, I'm crocheting because that's like it gives my hands something to fidget with, so my brain can actually be working, learning. And so sometimes having different mediums of, if it's visual, maybe having an oral option, something like that can be helpful. Um, Anything visual, so checklists, steps, um, lists to help your clients keep track of the materials or where they are in the program, because again, we
Hmm.
struggle with seeing the big picture sometimes of like, but where is this going? And so to have like an outline or a checklist or something, or visual charts, diagrams, anything to help kind of see and understand both the big picture and where it's going can
Yeah.
be really helpful, because we have a hard time kind of seeing the steps and how they fall into place. So
Uh,
yeah,
Those are so
that's what I would
good.
say
Yeah,
there.
I'm thinking about the different parts of Organized Coach Academy, and I'm like, okay, I do have slides that show kind of through. I have checklists in each chapter. I
Mm-hmm.
have an overview with a whole checklist for every module. I don't think I have captions. All
I
videos can
think they
be,
do tape. I
do I
think
have
you can click it
captions?
on. I think so.
Ooh,
I
okay.
feel like I remember it being there.
I'll have to check on that just to
Yeah.
make sure. But yeah, speed. Oh my gosh, there's program in, there's one video I want to listen to, but sometimes the setting gets messed up and I probably could just tell her and she'd change the setting, but I'm like, I cannot listen to that because I cannot listen to a video that's at one speed.
No.
Um, but yeah, that's so good. All those things are really good. The mix between video and writing, and then the length of the video too. I can get a little lengthy, so I try to make sure. But I mean, I think they're all under 15 minutes maybe,
Oh,
but
that's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
tutorial. So yeah, so good to
Yeah.
think about and to think about as a coach. Is that there? And the other thing that comes to my mind with my programs is reviewing it. So if we have a call, I'll screen share and just say, okay, here's where you find it. Here's what it looks like. Oh, remember, here's the search feature. If you want to look for something, here's
Yes.
this. Because I forget, like I want the programs I'm in, I want them to review that with me because now I'm
Yes.
like, I can't remember where anything is. And I don't even have ADHD. So I can't imagine how challenging it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Well,
review.
exactly. I'd written in a little note to myself. Essentially, so what we talked about was like the content, the things we can do for our
Hmm.
content. And then if we think on the actual coaching calls, I had written, be their executive functions as much as possible, which is what you're saying here. Let's help them review. Let's help them
Yes.
remember. Let's help them with this thing, right?
See
So
the
if you're
big
on a
picture.
call,
Yeah.
yeah, help them see that big picture. Um, Maybe you have like a structured agenda, especially if it's like a group call. So you know the
Mm.
format, so that it
Mm.
takes away some of that anxiety of like, am I doing it right? Am I presenting this the right way? Like, oh no, we come on, we first ask questions, we do a review, then we go into coaching. This is the way it works. So the brain can kind of lock into that and know what to expect. Or, if you have one-on-one clients, maybe you give them 3 prompts to reflect on before the call so that you can help them kind of channel all of their thoughts into what they want to, bring to the call. Or if you have a group call, maybe you give them guided questions so that they can apply what they're hearing to their own life, right? Like, okay, what is the topic here? How is that showing up for me? And kind of guided questions to keep them engaged in the coaching.
Yeah.
Um, or this can be a challenging one, I think, sometimes, is that as ADHDers, you're probably hearing this for me too. We are verbal processors.
Mm.
So we need to think through things out loud. A lot of us, we don't have as much kind of internal. We need to really express it to get to the point that we're trying to say. And on the outside, that can kind of look like, where are we going? Is this what's happening here? Do I need to like bring them back? And there is sometimes that, because we're all human and sometimes we're just rambling. But other times, and most times, if you have an ADHDer, they're probably helping give the backstory and a little bit of like what's going on to help them process the experience, to share what's actually most important. And there's kind of this an example I give sometimes is I will tell my husband about, the history of, I don't know, the world and all of the things that happened in 1946 and all of these other, and I'm like, and that's why I forgot the bananas at the grocery store today, right? Like there's so much background that seemingly has nothing to do with anything. But sometimes we need to give that context to help us get to that point. And I will say, if your brain does not jump around like ours does, it can be hard to follow. And
Mhm.
so for the coach who's just listening and you're like, what is happening? I see you too. I know it can be hard to follow. And so, like taking little notes and things is great. And I would just offer, if you get lost, it happens for sure, not a problem. One of the questions I love to ask is, okay, so you know, you mentioned XYZ, you mentioned bananas, and then now we're talking about your dance recital in fourth grade. Um, could you make the connection to me? Like, what's that
Mm.
connection there? I'm sure it's there. And I think like, can you help me draw that connection? I promise you it's there. It just happened in their head and they didn't say that part out
Yes.
loud. So if you're all of a sudden like, why are we talking about a dance recital in fourth grade? Ask them to help draw that connection, because it's there. It's just, it happened
Yeah.
internally instead
That's
of
such a good
externally.
idea. I feel like that's one of my favorite things is when someone is sharing a bunch of stuff like that, is to reflect back what I heard,
Hmm.
or like pull out the highlight maybe of what I see or what I hear, maybe it is that connection, and then talk them through that. Like I love doing that. So I don't know. That is good to think that through too, you
Yeah.
know. But I love that
Well,
question, asking that question.
yeah, it's a fun one, because again, I don't think it's something you need to feel bad about, or like, I should have been able to. No, you shouldn't have. It
Yeah, yeah,
happened all
yeah.
in the head. Don't even think about like, no, no, no. Our brains are moving so fast. Um, but yeah, just asking that question. And then actually what you were just saying is, I think, so beautiful. And one of the most powerful supports you can do in a session, which is to recap those key takeaways, or recap either just after a specific conversation or maybe at the end of a
Mm,
one-on-one call
hmm.
of, okay, so let's recap. What are we focused on this week? What is the thing you want to remember? What are you taking away from this? Because again, our working memory, even if it was an amazing session, our working memory still is not great. And so, like, it's not personal to you or your coaching. It's just that our brain literally can't hold it all in that moment. So providing that like recap, or if they press record on their side of the thing, so they have it kind of recorded there for them, any way to recap and help them really take those key takeaways with them and know what to focus on before you see them again, I think is impactful.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to write those questions down. Well, if you're listening, push pause, go back and write those specific questions. I love ending a session with, okay, here's what your focus is. I've always sent them my clients' notes, like an
Hmm.
email after that has that.
Yeah.
That's one of their favorite parts, or it's been one of their favorite parts. Now I'm shifting into putting them in like a Google Doc note system so that they have only one place they have to go to find it. So they're not like searching through 20 emails from the last 20
Hmm.
sessions. But that also, when you were talking, I was thinking that could be really good in a group session too. Like everybody write down their biggest takeaway from this call and
Hmm.
the one thing you're going to focus on this week, or, till the next call or whatever.
Yeah. And also, I mean, what you just offered, I think is really important too, is that when we put in these supports, they're helping everybody, right? It's not just helping the ADHD, or you're reinforcing. We all can benefit from these
Yes.
supports. It's just more of a make or break for the ADHD brain. we can all we can all use these supports, right? Whether
Totally.
we actually need them or not. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I mean, I know that I don't have ADHD, but I can relate to all of these things. I think the big difference is it's a bigger struggle. Like it's impeding your progress or someone with ADHD's progress ability whatever. Where me it's just a struggle. Like, oh yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah, well I tend to forget stuff too. Oh yeah, but it's not like painfully impacting my life.
Right. And that's the difference, right? And the key kind of distinction is it genuinely impacting your way of life, or is
Mhm.
it just kind of annoying that sometimes we forgot about this,
Yes.
or that, oh, I'm disorganized, or I can't find the email or whatever, versus like, oh no, I'm on a performance improvement plan now because I can't find those emails, or this
Yes.
is actually impacting my relationships entirely because it's out of sight, out of mind, and I literally forget people exist, and so I
Yes.
don't connect with them. Or I'm so emotionally like rejection sensitive that I don't connect because
Mhm.
that sensitivity is so strong that I can't show up in the, like that kind of stuff is life-changing stuff.
Mhm.
And so that's a distinction for sure.
The other thing right there that made me think of was if you're a coach or a client that has ADHD, to make sure to say that. Because I did have one client say something to me like, I struggle with rejection sensitivity. Is that how you
Yep.
said it? Yeah.
Yep.
And I was so appreciative that she came to me and told me that. And I don't remember what the specific situation was from that time, but it was so helpful to hear, like, okay, I can do a better job with that, or I do see how that came across, or, I want to put this in place because I want to help people. I want my programs to be good for all sorts of brains. But it was good. So, yes, tell us. We need to
Yeah.
know like what we can do.
Well, and I want to say that speaks a lot to you in creating a safe space for her or them to be able to say that too, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's also it's not always doesn't always feel safe to be able to share this personal thing, and you clearly created a space for that. So
Oh, I
I would
love that.
a nod to that too. Yeah.
Okay, one other question that's coming to my mind is as far as organization. So it's
Yeah.
called our podcast called The Organized Coach. So
Hmm.
what struggling ADHD struggles with organization? Is there things that you found in your own business that have helped you?
First of all, when you can simplify as much as possible and to create really clearly, this is what I'm focused on in this season. This is what I'm not focused on. Like this, I have something called my brilliant ideas list, which is where I just put all my ideas. And because when I call them brilliant, it's more fun. So I just keep
I
them on
love
this
that.
brilliant ideas list. And I'm like, oh, that's not for this season. This season is this. This is what we have capacity for. That is for later. We will revisit that next quarter or next year or whenever, but that is not for now. And so, getting really clear on that, and then having, when you've reduced the amount of things on your plate, then you can establish more reliable systems like you offer, right? In the different ways that you divide the materials and the documents, and having your docket and all of these different things to help streamline what you're doing. So the first step is to really clarify what matters most.
Hmm.
Where are you putting your energy so that you can put the organizational systems in place
Yes.
just to organize those things? It's kind of like when you're decluttering, don't go buy organizational containers until you get rid of all your crap. Get rid of all that stuff first, and then we start organizing.
Yes, I know. I
Yeah.
tell people all the time. Step 4 is where you go buy containers. You don't do it
Yes.
first. Yeah.
Yes. And I'll say too, one of the things that I am always doing for myself and for my clients, and this will apply to all things organization, time management, everything, when things are not going as you want them to, listen for the friction or look for the friction. Okay. So if your client is struggling to do something, or they said they wanted to start this routine and they're not doing it, or they're, whatever happens, or they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
get organized and they can't get the system to work right or whatever, I'm always asking myself, okay, there's friction somewhere. Because if it's a full body yes, if they're like, yes, I know I want to do this, it's not a should, they're not doing it because everyone else, like they genuinely want to do this, but there's something like they can't seem to do it. There is some piece of friction. And so if you can work with them to like put on this, I don't know,
Investigative.
investigator
Yeah.
hat or
Yeah.
something, thank you. And start looking for the friction and be really curious and non-judgmental. It can be a very little thing and you'll find it and you go, oh my gosh, that was it. So the one that happened for me a couple of months ago now, but it was one that I was battling for so long, which is getting to bed on time. Okay. So ADHDers struggle with something called revenge bedtime procrastination, big time. It's very hard for us to get to bed on time. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, it's just because it's probably my phone, right? Everybody, it's always the phone. It must be the phone. I just need to leave my phone out of the bedroom or whatever. Fine. But it was not fine. I couldn't seem to do it. Like I wanted to go to bed. I wanted to follow this routine, but there was something going on there. And I'm like, but what's the actual friction? Because I don't care if I can't scroll Instagram or like research something. That's not actually it. And I realized the friction was that I had established a routine, a habit stack for myself where I listen to a podcast while I'm doing my bedtime routine, because it's like that parallel tasking again. It's all the executive function of getting ready for bed. There's like so much involved, whatever. I needed like a podcast or something to parallel task with me as I'm doing it. But if I have to leave my phone out of my room,
Mm.
that was the friction, because I couldn't do that. And then I couldn't do the routine that I had set up with the podcast. And I was like, oh, that's the friction. Oh, I'll just put an Alexa in my bedroom, in my bathroom, and I can do that while listening to an Audible book. Done. Right. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just this little piece of friction that if we can find it, after, if you've put in all the supports, if you're like, I've done all the things,
Yeah.
start looking for the friction. There's
Well,
something that you could play with.
yes, that's interesting because I just got off a group call from my Organized Life Academy, and someone was saying that they were putting things on their calendar, but they weren't doing it. So, yeah. So, are there questions you ask to find that friction, or do you just kind of talking through it helps you see it, having someone witness it? Or,
Yeah. I often start with like, where's the friction? There's something here that's really uncomfortable or hard, or I love to ask, what's so annoying about this? What do you just hate about this? And it'll be like the person who's not doing the thing on their calendar. Well, I just hate how I can't see everything all in one because the box for Google Calendar is so small and I can't see
oh,
everything. And then it's like, oh, so we need to actually see a bigger overview. And we want to like be able to see how much time is going into everything instead of just these little boxes, or I don't know, I'm just making this
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Um, but to ask like, what feels really hard about this? And again, we can get judgy on ourselves, like the client of
Hmm.
like, well, it's just that I mean, I know this shouldn't matter,
I shouldn't.
but
Yes.
right. But it's like, no, it matters. It matters.
Yeah.
Let's just find the friction. I had a client once, she kept buying, like she really wanted to bring more vegetables into the way she ate. Um, and she realized the friction was like pulling off the seal on the dressing. It was really challenging, like after when she was so hungry. So once she got home from the grocery store, like that was part of the step when she was putting away groceries, that she would take off all the seals on dressings and things so that when she was ready to eat, there was no friction between like her and putting the dressing on the salad. That
Oh,
was the
and see, you
thing.
wouldn't think of that.
No, you wouldn't think of that. But she had to like really slow down and go, okay, but where is it that I just feel so annoyed about having to do this thing? Oh, there's this seal and my fingers slip on it. And like, it's a whole thing. It doesn't matter. But like, it was hard for her to open these things. And so she figured that out and was able to solve for it. And
Yeah.
so getting curious,
Where
because
is the
sometimes there really
friction?
is just a little piece of friction in
Yeah.
the way.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good tip. That is not something that's ever come up, in any of my podcast episodes. But where's the friction? That's such a good
Yeah.
question. You always
Yeah.
think like, "Oh, what's your why? Your why isn't strong enough." Well, maybe not. Maybe there's
No, like I
just the
genuinely
seal.
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's just a seal that your fingers slip on, or, you
Yeah.
can't bring yourself to wash your face if you don't have some sort of stimulation in the back of in your ears or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yep.
love all this. Okay, what else? Is there anything else you want to talk about or share?
For the coaches listening, like if you want a supportive space to learn for your business, Organized Coach Academy. I mean, it's really powerfully supportive. I love how you have such a great way of addressing different learning styles. You have videos, you have your templates, you have coaching calls, you have your co-working calls, you can go into Slack if you have a question. It like there's so many different ways that you approach teaching. And then everything is broken down. It's sequenced for us. It goes step by step so you don't have to like put that together. And then your system applies. I mean, it's for the business, but you can apply it to all these different areas, right? Like it really is applicable. And I love your dashboards that you have, right? Because again, you're helping us offload our executive functions. Oh, wait, I don't have to hold it. It's all here in this dashboard. And
Yes.
and you're just so willing to meet all your clients where they are. And you do show the little tips of like, no, literally just hover over here and then see how you can go split screen. That's what like you just really meet people to help them learn how to do it without feeling overwhelmed or like silly for not knowing. It's really it's a loving space. So I just think it's
Aw.
really built in a supportive way.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
because, sometimes as a coach, you want to, but maybe you just don't know how. So this episode is going to be very helpful for coaches that are like, how can I make my space a space that's more safe? I love the word safe for people with
Yeah.
different types of brains and stuff too. So,
Yeah. If your coaches want an action step, the first thing they could do is to just think through their current practice, whether it's one-on-one or like their content or a group or whatever, and think through what is one piece of additional scaffolding I could put in.
I
So
love
we
that
often talk
word.
about scaffolding for the, like, because sometimes we need to hold up the building, right? So what's the
Yeah.
scaffolding we can put in for the brain? So maybe it's, I turn on captioning for the videos, or I create a step by step for this process where I normally see people get kind of confused. I create a little workflow for it so they can check the boxes and see where they're at. Or I create some guided questions for a group call, or I ask my one-on-one client what would look like amazing support. How let's brainstorm, maybe do one thing to find a way to put in a little more scaffolding.
Yeah, I love that. So we're ending our podcast episode saying what hit home, like what resonated with you the most, and then what is one action step that you want to take.
Yes.
So good. And I love those
Yeah.
examples because they're easy. Like you don't have to make this a huge project. You're just going to
No.
go through your videos and make sure they can be speeded up and make
Yeah.
sure they have the option for captions. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And if anyone wants to take it further, I have in my podcast, I have a podcast roadmap. And for the ADHDers, it has the top 10 episodes you need to, work with your brain, get up to speed with the content. And then I also have categories of like time management episodes and goal setting episodes.
Ooh.
But for people who have clients with ADHD too, if you just want to kind of listen through the lens of learning about it and how you can help your clients, the roadmap could be a helpful place too if you wanted to dive even further into supporting ADHD brains.
Oh, I love that. So we'll link to that. Do
Yeah,
you have a
yeah,
link to that? Okay.
yeah, I'm busybeingawesome.com/map.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And how else do you help people? If someone really wants to dive deep into this with you, what are your programs?
Yeah, yeah. So I work both one-on-one and in small groups. One-on-one is a 6-month container where we really dive in and figure out your approach, your systems to work with your brain. And then my small group coaching program is called We're Busy Being Awesome. And we do the same thing, but in a group of 10 to 15 or so.
Ooh. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you also have your podcast.
It's called I'm Busy Being Awesome.
I'm
Yep.
busy. Okay. And it is so good. Your
Oh,
episodes are very,
thank you.
very good. And I love how you give examples and stuff in them too. It's really good. So
I appreciate
everyone
that.
needs to go
Thank you.
listen to that.
Thank you.
Okay, Paula, thank you so much for being here and
Thank
sharing all
you.
these very specific examples and tips and ways that we can be better ourselves if we have ADHD, but also help our clients who might have ADHD.
Well, thank you for sharing your space so we could do that. I appreciate it.
Wait, if you're finding this podcast useful, you must check out the Organized Coach Academy. It's my course where I walk you through every step to get your business organized, to get yourself organized, to save money and time, to prepare to hire someone, to do all the things that you want to do in your business with ease. Check that out at simplysquaredaway.com/OCA. Also, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but I would love it. It's my way of knowing that you're enjoying the podcast if you leave a written review. I have lots of freebies for you. They're linked in the show notes. You can find them in my bio on Instagram at Tracy Hoth. And until next week, have a beautiful day.